Since taking office in January, we've seen President Trump target several institutions that he disagrees with, including colleges, universities, and even law firms. Now it appears his administration is setting its sights on the Smithsonian museums here in D.C.
In a post on Truth Social, Trump took issue with the Smithsonian, saying in part, quote, "Everything discussed is how horrible our country is, how bad slavery was, how unaccomplished the downtrodden have been."
Trump went on to say that he's instructed his attorneys to review the museum, starting the same process that was done at universities earlier this year. So this could include changing or replacing exhibits that are deemed too divisive, according to a letter sent by White House officials. Now, reactions to Trump's message have been pouring in. Congressman Jim McGovern called it un-American, saying, quote, "Anyone who thinks there's anything good about enslaving human beings has no business running any country." And then there's commentator Brian Tyler Cohen, who said, quote, "Trump is mad that the Smithsonian is talking about how bad slavery was. That's where we're at."
But naturally, there are others agreeing with Trump's perspective that the museums should be more positive. Charlie Kirk shared his thoughts, writing in part, quote, "Americans have so much to be proud of. This is the greatest republic on the planet. The Smithsonian, the national museum system of our capital city, should reflect our national greatness." And columnist Scott Jennings saying, "It's true that slavery is one of the darkest chapters of American history, but it's also true that lots of brave Americans fought a war to end it. The question President Trump is asking is, are we going to define our country based on our worst moments or our best moments?"
You know, America seems like one of the places that I've been that really has and I travel a lot because I literally have a travel show that has a problem like atoning or fully dealing with its past. And I think by building the African American History and Culture Museum, there was an actual attempt to really show people not only the resilience and all the things that he wants to talk about of success, but also you literally journey through the museum and understand the implications and impacts you feel, you touch, you experience, what slavery could have been like from a viewership perspective to see how horrid it was, and you go upstairs as things get more resilient and actually experience it. So trying to tear that down seems odd to me, especially when it's not overemphasizing slavery. It's literally spending the amount of emphasis that covers the amount of time and the amount of, ways that it contributed to the way that America was fundamentally built and actually is today. Like, you can't disregard what happened and disregard how it directly connects with what still happens today. Well, I mean, cotton was picked, land was made, people were made rich off of slave. Like, this is all stuff that...
but that's true of every civilization that has ever existed.
But America can talk...
Why do we have to... look, slavery, the dark chapters in American history should be taught and recognized and are. I would challenge you on the notion that we have difficulty atoning for our past. I mean, schools teach American history. In fact, I was discussing this with Niall the other day. My problem with teaching American history is we don't teach anything recent because it starts in the same place, and now more history is developing as time goes on. And the Civil War period is covered in I can't vouch for every single school in America, obviously, but is part of the curriculum in all school districts. It is exhaustively covered, the horror of slavery and then the horror of the Civil War and how many people died as an effort to end it. So I just don't...
Well, I don't think that I mean in schools, literally. I mean adults America. Trying to pretend like when people say blanket statements like, oh, what does that have to do with me, or slavery? Like even the Jillian Michaels thing, I heard her whole interview on CNN, if you guys had watched her, and she talked a little bit about why she like statistics that make no sense. Like only 2% of people were slave owners at the time. Well, she's not accounting for the fact that children, multiple of them, and wives were not counted in that process. So if you had a home that benefited off of slave owners, or if you had an adjacency like a family member or a cousin that also used your slaves when you needed them, these are all benefiting off slave-free labor and things that were experienced in our society. And so when you have that mentality and adults that have platforms that say things like, it doesn't affect society in any way, or we need to move past this, it's really just not acknowledging that there's two ways to have the full conversation, is really understanding the history and then seeing where we are and accepting and embracing the accomplishments, celebrating the accomplishments, but also saying we have a long stretch of work to do in order to continue to move forward.
I agree with all that, but some people on the left act as if America, as the United States, is the only country or the only civilization of which slavery was an aspect. And again, that is not true. Every empire, every civilization from Asia to the Middle East to Africa to Europe to America to South America took slaves as prisoners of war enslaved, raped, killed, pillaged, and then used slave labor. Like, that is just true. What is
I understand the history of the world,
Yeah.
but in somebody who's speaking from an America First perspective all the time, I'm talking about our country. I'm talking about in 2017, Donald Trump went to go visit the same museum that he's criticizing. And these are quotes because I remember that visit, and it was so profound because he left right after accepting his position in office and saying he was, quote, deeply proud about the, quote, unbreakable American spirit. He was so happy to be part of this meaningful reminder and wish he could have spent all day there understanding the horrors of what our society has experienced. So how do you go from 2017 to having all this admiration for what was built and what was examined through your personal tour of this same museum, but then in 2025, like, did you just all of a sudden just forget that you had these thoughts and profound feelings, and now you want to get rid of some of the installations that you haven't seen in years, probably because all of a sudden it's too woke? Like, what's woke about slavery? It's
nobody
just
had a
understanding.
problem. Let's be clear. Nobody had a problem with the African American History Museum until their website had that aspects of white supremacy,
Which they apologized for.
So
and they took down.
Yeah, and I'm glad they did that. And again, I have no problem, nor do I, even if I did have some problem with the museum, I would not think the federal government should waste time trying. I don't want the government to dictate the exhibits at the museum. Frankly, I would just privatize all the museums, and then they can do whatever they want and find their own.
You always say that. Take all the
models,
federal money out of it.
But federal money out of everything, and then you have it. Then it's neat and clean, and then have your museum however you want.
And history is not based off of whatever Trump thinks is too inappropriate or whatever Biden thinks is not enough information about the horrors.
The left wants to
we
rewrite
shouldn't.
history
No,
to
the
make
Smithsonian
America
was
the villain
created
of
by
Earth.
no. Smithsonian was created independently to showcase actual facts in history, which it does. I've been there multiple times to that specific museum, and it does an amazing job of detailing the history of our country, which is just traumatic sometimes, but also brilliant sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I think that no politician should get that deeply involved with their hand in weaving what that. It's like no politician should get deeply involved in weaving what a textbook should look like. No politician should get deeply involved in weaving what museums should look like. They should allow the millions of people that come here and learn about the horrors and the brilliancy of our country to continue to do that amongst all these free museums in DC and go and experience these things. I mean, every Sunday you can walk around this beautiful city and really have the best time of your lives. For somebody like me with children that can learn, for people international that don't really understand the full capacity of our country, they can learn and really experience and understand and start from a place of understanding rather than a start from criticism and saying, oh, you're too this, you're too that. Like, maybe if you just understood the history, then you just have more empathy for many of the things that have come from slavery, like systemic things that we're still working on fixing in our society.
Yeah, we can talk about it, and we do talk about it. Again, it is the left has this wrong idea that it's not acknowledged, or we talk about it a lot, and as we should. It was something in our somewhat recent history that was overcome here as it was overcome everywhere else across the globe. And we fought a really bloody war that tons and tons of people died in, that the whole South burned to end. And so we conquered that evil. And that, again, that's something that is taught and should be taught. And I take umbrage sometimes at the left pretending like there's never been a worse and more evil. I'm not saying you're doing this, but I'm recalling past arguments I've had with people who are, I think, further to the left than you are, who are just like, America is the great Satan.
I mean, there's always more work to be done, though. I don't like to compare it to other countries because in any other argument, you don't want to compare America to other countries. Right. We're just not them.
Are those other countries doing a lot of time reflecting on all the evil things they did?
Well, actually, yeah, I spent a lot of time in South Africa, and the way that they're atoning for apartheid, which is way more recent in the 90s, is much more, let's discuss it, let's bring it to the forefront. We understand how egregious it was, and the conversation is welcome rather than shunned. Like, all right, we talked about this already, and I'm not talking about in textbooks. I'm talking about from their leadership, from the highest authorities there. Like, the conversation is an open book of like, yeah, this was terrible. All these things were attached to it. In fact, our World of Travel season 2 is about that largely, about how they dealt with some of their transgressions and how they're moving forward by trying to create space and provide land for people that probably own the land prior to get stolen from them, because of the color of their skin. So there's so much to discuss here and unpack. I know we only have a little bit of time, but I think yes, other countries are doing it better than us. Yes.
Up next, Governor Gavin Newsom is beefing with a retail company. We'll be right back after this.